This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Start off, I don't know if people have been paying attention, but we've been covering Phil's play.
Yeah, people are definitely aware.
Is this mic on?
Listen, man, I was sitting next to a guy who was at that play because he heard about it on the podcast.
Really?
I was sitting next to him.
Really?
What? I bet the last thing that guy expected after hearing it on the podcast was like, I'm going to go down to that plate and sit next to Steven Rinella.
Well, he was actually next to my daughter, Rosemary.
Oh.
It was me, my
Either
wife,
way.
my daughter, him.
Gotcha.
So they struck up a convo. And then at the end of the thing, we took a picture, and he said, yeah, I heard about it on the podcast. Came down.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And Phil...
It's marketing in action right there.
Phil does kiss someone in that show. And Corinne painted it out like it was going to be real seedy. She said it made her uncomfortable.
Oh, it was
It wasn't much.
just a little peck.
Yeah, it was more in a peck, but it wasn't like how would you describe it, Phil?
On like a scale, like from a peck to a passionate French kiss, I'd put it at like, I don't know, a 3.
I was going to say a 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's different from show to show.
Oh, do you
You
bring
know?
it some? Were you bringing it some
Yeah,
nights?
depending on how I feel. Yeah, I'll slip in a little. I won't tell her.
God.
So some nights you just bring it, and some nights you were like you weren't in the mood.
No, that would be inappropriate.
So you would do it the same every time.
Yeah, mostly.
It
Yeah.
made you uncomfortable.
Yeah, a little bit. I said before, it's like watching your brother like kiss someone.
Didn't
I
make
don't
me
know.
remotely uncomfortable.
No? Okay.
No, Steve enjoyed it, I think.
I did, and then I got home and I texted Phil. I said I didn't think it was that sexy. And he said if he ever gets cast in something NC-17, he'll let me know.
Yep. You'll be the first to know.
So are you happy with how it all went, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, all those people I worked with are super nice and had a really good time. Yeah.
It's done
I
now.
can't tell you what it was like to watch it, but I hope it was okay.
Our kids even liked it.
Don't you have
Yeah, it's
another
good
one
to
coming up?
Well, our 8-year-old, he didn't give it the best review
Sure.
because he was ready to get going.
No, he he probably wasn't interested in like the 1930s Russian politics that make up a lot of the third act.
I could sense that he got a little lost.
Yeah.
So he got a little lost in the stuff about the Russian Tsar and everything.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So he probably wouldn't give it the best review, but the other ones really liked it.
That's fine. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, he'd rather be rolling around the mud or something like that.
It was cold outside though, so I couldn't send him out there.
Getting his boots
And then
wet.
I got in a fight with my kids up at the concession booth.
About what?
Yeah, embarrassed myself. At the concession stand.
They wanted some candy
You
or
know,
something.
like for whatever reason, in movie theaters, the candies are huge boxes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They got every movie theater in the world has the same.
Yeah. Big box.
Yeah, like what? I don't know. It's like good. What's it? Good and Planties.
Yeah.
Reese's,
Yeah.
Reese's Pieces. Yeah.
So we go up there, and I'm like, "Well, pick one box out," and they all grab a box. I'm like, "No, agree on one box." And then meanwhile, there's people behind us in line. So eventually, I said, "Never mind. Put all those boxes down." Went back to the seats.
They didn't like that.
Well, and their ma went up and got it. It's just they wound up with I won. Essentially, I won because they wound up with one box.
Okay.
But I lost in one.
You came out even.
Mm-hmm. Joined today by Tyler Friel, Alaskan hunter, trapper, podcaster, writer, guy that shoots bears with a stick bow,
Yeah.
flesher. What else?
I don't know, man. I do have done, I guess, a little bit of everything.
You host Tundra Talk,
Host Tundra Talk.
and you cover Alaskan outdoor politics and hunting and fishing.
Yep.
We're
Do
going to
little
ask
bit
about
of
a
that.
bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know, try not to take it too seriously, but we, just a bunch of myself and a bunch of buddies who we live in Alaska and kind of offer a good perspective and talk shit about each other and share hunting stories and tips. And I figure if it can be entertaining with a little bit of useful information, then that's a good goal. So
Yeah, and you guys mix it up pretty hard because you guys are you're into a lot of the sophisticated stuff.
yeah,
Like
which
sheep,
which ki-
grizzlies.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Which it makes it kind of tough because a lot of those, are super serious subjects, and you can dive way into any given one, and as a whole, it's all just it's really more than any one person can keep track of. So you kind of you got to pick your battles, but I do try to do my best to stay on top of what's going on, stuff that comes up, and I can write about that. My day job is a staff writer for Outdoor Life, so I cover a lot of that stuff in there, as well as all my normal duties.
Great. We're going to get into all that. We're going to cover a lot of stuff that's going on in Alaska today. So if you got any kind of interest in hunting in Alaska, wildlife management in Alaska, we're going to get into that and hang tuned. And we're going to talk about Alexander Supertramp's boss. This is the weirdest deal, dude. So I'm just going to tease this, then we're going to tell the story in greater detail. Like everyone knows John Krakauer's Into the Wild. And they made that movie out of it.
Eddie Vedder made that song.
I read that whole book watching an avalanche slide for black bears one day. Read the whole book. I didn't read it till late in life.
Slow
How'd
day
it
of
pan
bear
out for
hunting.
the bears?
Didn't get one, but there's a bunch of sandhill cranes. It was the weirdest thing. I always remember that day because there was nothing was melted off except that avalanche chute and sandhill cranes walking up and down that avalanche chute.
Those cranes are a pain in the ass, man, especially moose season. Right at about the time stuff starts popping off.
Oh my gosh!
Then the cranes show up and you can't hear nothing.
Isn't that wild? It's
all
funny you
day.
mention that. 'Cause, yeah. That's the only time I see that.
It's a thing, man.
Coming through some pass nearby, and
Yep.
it's like, turn that off.
I've never seen that many sandhill cranes, and they do that dance.
Oh yeah, thousands of them.
A lot of times
get
there's-
out
It's
of
so
here.
funny you mention that, man, because the last two times we've been moose hunting, it was just like after a while, you're like, just stop that for a minute.
Yeah. Well, and especially you're working with limited time, and every dead ass calm morning and evening, you're wanting this is the time to get some sound out there, and those cranes won't shut up. It's really it irritates a guy.
Oh yeah, and you're hoping to hear that
Yeah.
way off.
A lot of times you hear
hit,
them.
hit me with your bull grunt real quick.
That's
a
good.
good
No,
one.
hit me
That's
hit me with some volume though.
All right, I came
You got that
unprepared.
seed.
I gotta sit up a little bit. You get a little bit of.
I want you to do two things. I want you to
guttural.
hit me with some volume, and then I want you to do like our buddy Giannis can make a noise that sounds like an elk way off.
Yeah.
You know how you feel that noise before you hear it?
Oh yeah.
I want you to hit me with some
All right,
volume
all
and
right.
hit me with a way off.
All right. Let's see.
Oh, he's got the click.
He's got the click.
Yeah.
Now hit me with the shit. Is that a bull? That's good, dude. All right, so this bus. So everybody knows that this kid, Chris McCandless, was his name. His nickname, his chosen name, as Brody pointed out earlier, was Alexander Supertramp. Died in this damn bus. By MacArthur, right?
No, by Healy,
By Healy. Okay.
right outside of
Not MacArthur.
Denali.
Yeah, what am I saying? By Healy. And the bus sat out there and it became a tourist attraction.
Yep.
But yet that bus, your family had camped in that bus.
Oh yeah.
Way before any of this stuff went down.
Yeah. So from the time that book became popular, I think it was maybe even I can't remember what year the book was, but it was right about the time we moved to Alaska because I was born in Colorado. But my dad was born and grew up in Fairbanks, and after my grandpa passed away in 71, my grandma moved them back down to Colorado. So that's kind of why we were not there. But as soon as that book became popular, my dad would just be like, "Oh yeah, that was our camp. We spent many nights in that bus."
That's so
And
wild,
so
man.
that was all it was for a lot of years, and became just kind of a deadly tourist attraction, which it's sad, and I mean, not to make light of it, but people were constantly having to get rescued, trying to get out there
Because they're crossing that river to get out there.
Yeah.
How did that bus get out there in the first place? Do you know?
all this is this whole story. So after people were tired of this shit, they ended up making the decision to helicopter. They took a Chinook and helicoptered that thing out of there. And the University of Alaska in Fairbanks got a hold of it, and their plan is to display it at the museum there. And I had written a story about how that was like our family's hunting camp back in the day, and the gal that was in charge or is in charge of the bus for the museum got in touch with me, said, "Hey, well, you guys want to come check it out?" And so we did. My dad, my uncle, and I went over there and checked it out, and it was pretty cool. They hadn't been in it since I think 72.
No way.
And my dad's like, "Oh, remember when Dad blew up the wood stove by starting throwing gasoline in there to get it going, and blew the stack and blew the door off." And anyway, so as we're sitting there talking too, my dad's like, I know, Mom, my grandma had 8mm footage of this somewhere. She had a bunch of 8mm videos that she had taken, and I ended up getting a hold of them and digitizing them. But so all this and learning from the kind of the history of that bus, they figured out, I don't remember the exact year, it was maybe like 60 or 61, early 60s.
What year was the bus manufactured?
I don't remember. But it was a Fairbanks City Transit bus for a while, and it was part of a project to improve the Stampede Trail. They got a grant, which is a road that goes out across the Teclanica and goes out there. And so it was left out there by construction crew, road constructions. A guy that was working for that crew had bought it and outfitted it as like a bunkhouse to bring his family along it was like a whole summer project. And
well, how did he get it in there though?
They drug it out there on a road.
And the
It was a road. Yeah.
But what's the whole deal? Here's what I understand about it. What's the whole deal with you got to like cross the river to get to it?
Yeah.
So is it a winter road or what?
No, it was, I don't know what time of year they maybe got their equipment across there early in the spring or in the winter. But my dad, they used to just drive across it in the fall because it's a glacial fed river. And after the water levels start going down, they just drive their pickups out
so
there.
It's like, so it's only tricky seasonally.
Yeah.
I understand.
Which is kind of what got him in trouble. He came back and, tried to get out apparently, and surprised the river's too high. But, so they drug it out there as part of a bunkhouse for this guy's family, and axle broke or something happened to it, and they just left it intact. And later in the 60s, my grandpa had been hunting up the Steese country and the 40-mile country and got sick of dealing with people. So he heard about this bus that was set up as a bunkhouse, and they started hunting out there. So through like the latter half of the 60s.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that dude died in that bus, right? They found his body in that bus.
Yep. So when did he stop using it as a hunting camp?
I think 72 was the last year because my grandpa passed away in 71, and I think it was 71. And my uncle has pictures where he went back out there the following year. I think he'd said they skipped a year, and then 72 was back out there, and he has some pictures with like, moose and caribou cut up all, kind of right there.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the photos right now. That's crazy, man.
Looks like some people were using it for target practice for a
while.
People shoot. Where was I the other day? I couldn't believe the amount of things that have been shot. Oh, we're just driving on some BLM land. And I was like, you almost had to plan ahead to shoot that much stuff.
Yeah.
Bringing extra ammo.
I've seen like a 72-inch flat screen TV on public land just shot up.
Oh, that's great.
There was a trend for a while. We talked about this. There was a trend for a while out. I noticed it out in Missoula where people come and shoot trees down. Living trees. Shoot them till they fall over. So a couple quick things, Tyler, and we'll get back to this. The walleye, my favorite subject.
Dude, I can't
I'm
believe
so
this.
sick of
We
these
got
dudes.
weights and fish. What do you mean you're sick of these guys?
Oh, they just
I'm not sick of them. I just can't wait to hear what they do next.
well, he didn't. Here's the thing. This is what everybody's saying. This is what everybody thinks. So everybody knows. Everybody knows. When we had the guy on, the walleye cheating scandal, where the Jason Fisher, who's been on the podcast, is conducting a walleye tournament. There's some fish that. Yeah, do I really have to, to what degree do I explain this?
He looked at their bag, knew they weren't 4-pounder. Like they weighed at 7. He knew they were 4. Cut them open, and
yeah, the guy's weighing fish all day long at the end of a tournament, and you just know what fish look like. Like a 20-inch walleye weighs this, 18-inch walleye weighs that. And some guys bring some fish up, and you're like, oh, they got blank pounds of fish, but they weigh them up, and it's like, wow, that's really heavy. Takes a Leatherman, which is sitting right behind Uncle Chesty, in a display case, takes that Leatherman and cuts open the walleyes, and they're packed full of weights and fish fillets. These two individuals, what are these fellas' names? Chase and I don't want to.
I think really the most important one is
Kaminsky and
Kaminsky.
Runyon.
Yeah.
Kaminsky is the
These guys become real famous for this cheating deal. Then one of them gets in some other trouble soon after. He violates a restraining order, and he equips his kid with a bunch of fake $100 bills, and they go and sends him down to the bowling alley to buy stuff with the fake $100 bills. It makes the news. Now he's in the news all over again, including at themeateater.com. He's in the news all over again. Also deer poaching. However, this is old, not new deer poaching.
Stuff getting uncovered.
He's getting in trouble for stuff he did a long time ago. Like, for instance, let's say if I was 20 and I'd gotten in trouble for setting snares illegally, and then all of a sudden my buddies are like, oh, you know what, too? One night we were out jacklighting cottontail rabbits, right? And be like, you know the guy that got in trouble for setting snares? He's in trouble now for jacklighting cottontail rabbits. And I'd be like, I did that before. It's just everybody's telling on me now about everything. That's the situation he's in now.
And I think
I'm not apologizing for. I'm just saying now it's like they're just, you know what I mean?
But we've really
All
established
his
like a
secrets
profile.
are coming out.
Yeah.
Well, I thought I read something about this where he had gotten in trouble for this prior to the walleye stuff.
I think
That's
there
my
was-
understanding.
And had
too.
his license revoked.
Yeah.
Do you
And
mind if I
there's-
jump it? What are we buying with $100 bills at a bowling alley?
It's a great question.
Like we're worried about all this stuff. That's
Yeah.
Bowling's
The
not
real-
as
that's
cheap
the
as it
real
used to
issue.
be.
Yeah, maybe there's some other stuff in there too.
The real issue is what's incriminating about the counterfeit money is they have a text exchange where he gives his kid this money, and it's like it says like not actual money. It says like it's like movie money.
Yeah.
And like movie money looks pretty real, but it says, I don't know what the hell it says, movie money on it, something. Sends his kid down,
Monopoly.
and then they text about it. He's like, dude, it worked great. Send someone.
Send
How
more.
old was his kid?
18.
He's like, Bobby's gonna come by and get some more. Like it worked, and they're celebrating that the counterfeit money was accepted. But I just, at this point, it's not like a new,
I thought there had been rumors about him being a poacher
was.
flying around for
There
a
was.
long
There
time.
was.
And,
Well, he was. I think he was a convicted poacher.
Yeah, and the scrutiny from everything else certainly didn't help his case any. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people eyeballing him.
There's an age component because people in glass houses, right? So we broke all manner. As youngsters in high school, we broke all manner of laws. Let me tell you, for instance.
Willfully or ignorantly?
No, let me
Or
tell you,
both?
for instance. I'm going to tell this about a guy that's not alive anymore. Nothing they can do to him. Smelt dipping with Eric Kern. Okay. We were smelt dipping near White Lake Channel, where some smelt were spawning up on a gravel bar no one knew about, not going in the creek, spawning along the shoreline. And here comes by a salmon feeding on smelt. Eric Kern scoops it up and is in the smelt net. Now, there's no way in hell he's going to let it go, but that's an illegal capture. He puts the salmon down his waders. You want to talk about a mess.
How old was he?
We were in high school. We were old enough
Okay.
to drive.
So Chase Kaminsky is 36, and he's accused of deer hunting between 2013 and 2021. 2013 is 10 years ago, which would make him 26.
Too
the
old.
time.
Too old for poaching.
I
But let me just clarify. Like, I'm not saying, let me get to my broader point.
Mhm.
And this isn't about me. This is Eric. Well, no, because another time we sold our smelt to a guy in high school. 10th grade, I think. Sold smelt. That's illegal. Point being, if I had gotten in trouble for something, all these infractions that seem like just minor issues, like Eric caught a salmon, put it in his waders, dipped smelt with the salmon nose first down into the ankle of his waders for like whatever amount of time, and then like took the salmon back out later. Okay. All this like stupid stuff that I would never let my kids do. But all this stupid stuff, if you then got in trouble and all of a sudden all this came out, you'd paint this really damning portrait of an individual who just had to be around a lot of like dumb decision making.
Around it or the ringleader of it? I'm
Yeah,
not
I don't
talking about
think
your
that's-
buddy. I'm talking about this guy.
I'm not condoning it. I'm saying like reading this, it makes me look and say, man, at a point like when all the dirt comes out, when
On
all the
everybody,
dirt comes
right.
out, it winds up looking. I just would invite people out there who grew up in a rural atmosphere and grew up like a redneck upbringing,
To look at
to
themselves in the
think
mirror.
pretty hard. Okay, to think pretty hard.
Oh, they probably didn't. When they were that age, they probably just did shit and didn't even think about.
You didn't think about it.
I was on Onyx the other day looking at all the old spots I used to hunt when I was real young, and realized that none of that shit was public.
Yeah,
I thought it was all public back then.
we thought public was that no one yelled at you when you were there.
Yeah,
If you went there a couple times and never got yelled at, it's like, oh,
I was like, oh, I'm gonna look at that old turkey hunting spot I used to go to all the time, and realize it was deep into someone's private property.
You know, Steve, we
And I
should
thought
start
it
a
was
new.
game lands.
We should start a new segment called Confessions.
Confessions. Yeah.
I don't, and here, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But it would be, but here's the thing about it, it was so unusual about it. So in those days, like you would have your mom would apply for a doe tag.
Oh yeah, that was very common in my circle.
So
too.
my mom might draw a doe tag, and you'd get the doe for mom. And I'm not
Well,
I'm
there are
not
some
condoning it. I
places-
just don't want to act like I don't want to sit here now and act like things didn't happen that happened. So with this fella, now with all this stuff coming on, I just be like, it looks bad, but just think about your own life and think about things you've done. And once it came to be like, are you really telling me that, like, if you like to drink, are you telling me you never drove home when you might have blown a drunk? But what does that look like when you get caught?
I don't think that's the same as this guy though, because he's just kept doing that shit and knew it was wrong. Like this wasn't like, oh, back when I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, I know. And cheating in a stuffing walleyes full of walleye fillets is like on a whole other, and like cheating people out of money is a
And
whole other level.
winning boats.
I think it's fair to say this guy's like a criminal.
A grade A dirtbag.
Yeah.
Like a
I got
vast.
another confession for you. When I got
Feel better?
for Christmas, I got a Marlin. For Christmas, I got that bolt action Marlin 22 mag that everybody had for a while, and pulled a car over next to this thing called Tamawalla Lodge, and saw a fox squirrel perched up on a tree, and shot it out of the car window, and then ran and got it and jumped back over the fence.
Do you feel a lot lighter right now?
If someone had seen me do that, you know what the list of things would have been? Illegal discharge of firearm.
Yep.
I don't know.
Trespassing,
You'd wind up having this
poaching.
insane looking rap sheet.
But also back then, like maybe that would have happened, but there was I also feel like there was a little bit more tolerance for that kind of
they'd have
stuff.
been
We're in a
like, that
different-
kid
yeah.
just shot a squirrel out of his car window.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for next week's edition of
I'll make a
Confessions.
list. Because if I ever run for political office, I'm going to do this anyways.
Yeah, it's better to preempt it.
Yeah. First thing I'm going to do is here's everything bad I've ever said.
Is
or
that
done.
your plan, Steve? Is that what you're going to do?
If I do, that's what I'm going to do. No one's going to come and say, like, he did. I'll be like, dude, it's on my, I already told you everybody that. It's on my list of shit I did. That's real bad.
Ranella Putelis 2024.
Here's the thing that's even more surprising than the fact that that fellow's been in a lot of trouble. Japan. If I were to name for you if I said you name for me countries that have a lot of bear attacks, it'd go something like this. America. And then they'd be like, Canada. And then
Russia.
they wouldn't know what to say. Oh yeah, you'd probably get Russia.
Russia.
Japan has had 167 bear attacks this year.
That's a lot.
So you got to think about the positioning of Japan.
What kind of bears are those?
Brown bears.
Oh, okay.
Think about the positioning of Japan. Like,
they are? I thought they were black bears.
They got both, I think.
Oh,
do they have
okay.
black
I
bears
think
too?
they have black bears too. I don't know if they're not like American black bears, but some kind of.
Someone should look this up.
I'm pretty sure that's correct.
But if you imagine the Aleutians, right? Like when you look at, I wish we had this for scale. I mean, just how far the Aleutians stretch out.
Sure.
Like it's the width. Like imagine how big. Like you could fit Texas, California, most of Montana into Alaska, and then the Aleutians basically extend Alaska by that distance. It's distance
Yeah.
all over again.
Towards Japan.
Yeah, and
just looking at the map, it looks like it's about the same distance as it would be from the coast of California to Hawaii.
I mean, Japan gets a lot of the same kind of salmon runs.
yeah, that's what. It's like a Pacific Rim, you know, and so they have this suite of wildlife. Do you remember we had the bear researcher and general all around good guy Carl Malcolm on? And he talked about researching bears in China, and he was saying saying, man, the weird thing about it is everything's kind of the same, but a little different. So he said, like, you look at a tree and be like, man, it's a lot like our beech tree. And there'd be a grouse, be like, that's a lot like our grouse. A little different, but that's a lot like our grouse. And the bear is like, it's a lot like our black bear, but a little different. He says, but the whole thing would fly out the window when you look and there's a big golden monkey. He goes, we don't have one of those. But anyhow, they got this bear, like such a bear issue in Japan.
Yeah,
They're set to, they've exceeded their 2020 record. 2023 has already passed up the 2020 record of 158 bear attacks in Japan. A woman was just mauled to death. Of these bear attacks, 3 fatalities, including a 79-year-old woman mauled to death in her backyard. Bears, outskirts of Tokyo. They say there was a poor crop of beech nuts. This was reported in Bloomberg. A poor crop of beech nuts has led to more bear-human interactions. And they are offering like a compensation program to bear hunters. 5,000 yen for each bear they shoot. Does that really, what does that mean? Why do you have $45, Corinne? That's not what they're paying them.
Let me see.
Yeah,
the yen is about 125 or so to the dollar. Let me just check that.
Well, you just got to watch Seinfeld and get the Kramer when he has the dudes that are millionaires that have 1 million yen, and he convinces them to spend all their money, and they end up sleeping in the chest of drawers.
I would love to know, like, what their current management system is as far as hunting goes.
Yeah,
like,
5,000 yen is like $33 right now.
That's the bounty?
And there's the Usuri brown bear and the Japanese or Asiatic black bear.
What does the bear cause all the trouble? I remember Carl Malcolm saying the Asiatic black bear mixes it up a lot. Scrappy little bear.
Yeah, I don't see that.
I'm guessing that's the one. I'm only saying that's the one because Carl Malcolm was saying it's like a
got
fight.
a temper.
It's like a fighting little bear.
Oh, there's a picture in the Bloomberg article of a group of hunters searching for a brown bear that was on the loose in Sapporo a couple of years ago. So maybe it's about both of them. Both black and brown bears.
God, man, just don't picture it.
Jeez.
Well, I think they have a commercial market for bear meat over there.
Do they?
Black bears anyway, yeah.
Yeah, we covered that one.
Yeah,
Remember they have
like,
a vending
yep.
machine. There's a guy that you can buy bear meat out of a vending machine. It was expensive.
Yeah, I remember seeing that pop up.
5,000 yen just doesn't seem like a lot. I know that the dollar is strong to the yen right now, but
still
it doesn't
$50
seem like a
is
lot.
like,
no, man.
Yeah.
I need $50 like.
It's
That'd be like
just
a good,
skinning 'em,
that'd be
isn't
like
it?
a good price for like a raccoon boundary. I'm like, really? That's great. $50 for a bear? That's a lot of work, dude.
Yeah.
So, but if you can turn around and also do the sale.
right.
Speaking of bounties, that was Corinne's transition like that. Speaking of bounties, this is one of those perennial stories that pops up now and then. But
The numbers just keep getting higher.
yeah, an angler earned. Can we get into our personal connection to this, or you think we should not?
If you want to, I think that's fine.
An angler earned $100,000 Now, okay. I don't know what he's got into this for overhead.
He profited.
Let me back up.
He's got a lot of time.
What kind of boat does he have?
So on the Columbia River, in order to, as part of a salmon restoration program, I'm going to back way up. All the dam building we did on the Columbia has the long-term impact of really imperiling a bunch of salmon runs. And, you know, some people, when people look at, I've gotten into this before, some people look at like, well, why did the U.S. win World War II? You know, and you could get in all these things. Like one way we were able to produce more aluminum more quickly than anyone else. So we're, you know, that's the limiting factor that allows us to win World War II. How'd they do that? Well, because we had all these dams on the Columbia, which generated so much electricity, and smelting aluminum requires a lot of electricity. And so we're, you know, the long and short of it is they dam the shit out of that river, and it's just, the salmon runs are basically not salmon runs anymore. And there's all these efforts now to try to find some possible way to begin dismantling some of these dams, but it has all this implication for agriculture and shipping. It's one of the biggest problems that your kids will be hearing about. Your kids will probably hear a lot more about it than you will in your lifetime. As part of the salmon restoration program, they're trying to kill off predators of salmon smolt.
And the dams also created ideal conditions for this pike minnow to float.
Yeah, so
walleye.
You build a giant structure that impedes the movement of fish, and on top of that, you then create a reservoir system that gets loaded up with smallmouth bass and pike minnows, and then that stuff just hammers all the salmon smolt that usually in the past wouldn't even really have to worry about piscivorous predators. It's all part of a big mess. So there's like the elephant in the room. That's not really the accurate way to put it because people do talk about it. There's the core primary issue. The core primary issue is damming on the Columbia. You can love the dams or hate them, but it's like an objective reality that the dams on the Columbia are driving salmon runs to extinction. You can be like, oh, price you pay or whatever, but that's just the truth, however you feel about it. So since you can't take care of the main issue, they're always trying to take care of like little minor issues. And one of the minor issues is predation on salmon smolt by pike minnows. So they've set up a bounty program. What's a pike minnow worth? They set up a bounty program where you can kill pike minnows.
It's a varying rate. $6 a fish for the first 25 over 9 inches, 25 to 200 fish, 8, 200 plus, 10.
So a dude, Corinne talked to the guy that runs the program. A dude netted himself, he caught 10,000 northern pike minnows, landed himself $100,000. So that becomes the headline, but I don't know what he's got in it for expenses.
Yeah, I mean,
and we tried to get him to come on the podcast, but these guys that are making a living fishing pike minnows, what's funny is you think that like they would be like, well, here's how I do it. Let's get them all to save the salmon. But he doesn't want to damage the resource.
Right. He wants to make sure he's got an income.
He doesn't want anyone to know how he does it because he doesn't want to damage the resource.
There's supposed to be
I'm sympathetic.
There's supposed to be some steep competition and all kinds of drama around like who's known locally to be like one of the top.
Sounds like a new reality show we should do.
Yeah.
They've been approached, in fact.
But isn't it funny that this whole thing is to try to kill off pike minnows? And there's a guy that figures out how to really do it, but he doesn't want to talk about it because he doesn't want everybody killing the pike.
If we can Seth and I go do that?
I was going to suggest that like they take off some time next season to see what they can
you can do a
reel
little
in.
practicing for those things right here in Montana.
The weird deal is these northern pike minnows are a native fish.
Sure. And in like Colorado, Utah, they're like a protected, threatened, or endangered species. Like they can't have, they're doing very poorly there.
12,000 people are getting after it. 12,000 people are catching 156,000 pike minnows, but one dude is catching 10,000 pike minnows. the hell's he doing? Do you know?
Netting.
You think he's netting?
Probably. It'd be a lot.
What'd that guy say? Is he rodding and reeling them, or what's?
Well, that's the
You
thing.
know, I
Is like,
should've
what's
asked
a
that.
legal method of take for this? Because like netting, you'd have bycatch of
Other stuff.
salmon and other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you
Let's
can
see,
like
does this article say?
purse seine them where you can
Yeah.
safely release.
I know. I think they're hook and line in them, man.
You think?
Well, in Corinne's notes from her conversation, she uses the term reeled.
Where
Yeah,
I
Corinne, why
yeah.
are you not just hammering away with facts right now? You were on the phone with the guy.
Yeah, but I just put some bullet points in there. So I probably wrote reeled because he said reeled.
yeah, I
I don't think I just pulled that out of thin air. So
That's not what you were going to say.
well,
I just for some reason
She
I
paused
thought it
before
was.
she said thin air.
I thought it was rod and reel catching for some
She
reason.
said, I don't think I just pulled it out of
She was
thin
thinking,
air.
thinking something else.
I think
Same thing went through my head.
if it were rod and reel, I would run a fly rig on the river where you got flies off
Like a
your
sabiki.
leader and pull it
I mean,
slowly
that's a big
upriver.
fish. So
This is the first year that someone. This is the first year that a single angler. I don't know if is that true. The
Yeah.
first year that a single angler earned
got over-
$100K.
Yeah, got over 6
The guy that
figures.
earned $100K should really come on the show. I want you to ask you
He
any
knows-
specific
he knows
questions.
Us. He knows us, but
He knows. He was flattered, right?
yep. He just
Let-
doesn't
come on
really
the show,
wanna-
and we'll bleep out anything that you don't. Any trade secrets.
You know what we can do if we like record him in the studio? You know how like with those documentaries they
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah,
do a
shadow,
silhouette.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
can just totally
It'll
obscure
be like
his
you're a mob
identity.
informant.
or like getting a picture with a bunch of special forces dudes, how they like blur out their eyes.
We'll blur out your
Do that.
eyes. We'll give you a mob. We'll give you a mob informant.
You keep a low
Silhouette.
profile at
Filter.
the boat ramp.
We
We'll
won't-
blur out your eyes.
won't
We
say
won't
your
ask
name.
you any specifics about where you go or what you do. And in terms of like word getting out, dude, word is out. This is a widely reported thing. We'll give you like a bunch of free clothes.
Cook up some
A
pike
knife.
minnow.
I'll have you for dinner. We'll give you a brand new fillet knife so you can fillet your pike minnows up. And a wallet you can put all your money in.
A MeatEater
Made a
branded
No,
all.
we'll give one of those
Made
FHF
a-
wallets
Oh yeah.
because you need it to haul around all that money. Give 2 wallets.
You might need a backpack for all that money.
We'll give you a backpack, put all your money in,
First light duffel.
and just come. We'll give you a duffel to put all your money in, and you come on the podcast and talk to us. In 2022, the rewards went like this. So the rewards to 5 anglers. So the top 5 anglers in 2022: 69K, 63K, 56K, 54K, 43K.
Then it really drops off after.
Then it really-
that.
okay.
Yeah, but I didn't know if it was like then by like 20 grand it drops off, but it drops off.
So was the 100K guy in that top tier
The
last year?
100K, yes,
Okay.
yes.
So he's a command
It's
master.
like the
angler.
top couple are trading places.
10% of the anglers catch 80% of the fish.
Yeah, but
which
that's
is
true in general, man.
Yeah, with hunting,
Yeah.
with
He's a
100
command master angler.
156,000 of those things they removed in 2023. Wonder if it's doing any good.
God, I'd love to have the guy on the show.
Pike minnow's good.
I just want to
Good
know what else
eating.
he's catching.
They used to eat them way back in the day, the mountain man era.
You know what? It looks like it'd be better than it is. It looks like like a walleye had sex with a sucker.
They
Yeah.
don't have teeth,
Speaking of that,
big sharp teeth.
I wonder if you could turn around and sell those to like for trapping bait or something.
trap and bait.
They sell them for bait up in Northwest Colorado for Lakers and shit. Small ones.
My boy's gonna get into the sucker fillet business. Speaking of which, you guys sent in a picture. I'm gonna put this on. So we're trying to like get everybody's great cell phone not cell phone.
Trail cam.
Get everybody's great trail cam pictures. You know what's so funny? A guy sent a picture of 3 wild hogs all lined up in a. And
Not exactly
I'm being
lined up.
sensitive I'm being sensitive here to family listening.
They're vertically lined up.
in a copulatory
posture.
3 in a copulatory train.
Pile.
And the caption he wrote, I can't get over it. The caption he wrote is, try that in a small town. But it looks like a small town to me. I mean, it doesn't look like a big city. It's like out in the woods. All right. Back to our special guest, Tyler Friel. And here's where I want to start, Tyler. What in Sam Hill is going on with Dall sheep? Okay. Dall sheep numbers and Dall sheep closures, and break the whole thing down to me. In vast tracts of federal that you can't hunt. Tell us the whole damn story.
All right. So
because you've covered this heavily.
Yeah, I'll do my best. And
what's a Dall sheep?
Yeah.
Well, they're Alaska's native wild sheep, thin horn, very similar to a stone sheep.
Mm-hmm.
They're predominantly all white. Is kind of their defining characteristic. They live in, I don't know what they say, like officially 7 or 8 mountain ranges in Alaska. Pretty widespread. Pretty much all the suitable sheep habitat in Alaska has Dall sheep on them, and the population, goes over into Canada and then transitions to stone sheep, and then bighorn sheep down below.
Yeah, that's a thing I'd read. There's a book that a biologist out of Fairbanks put out. It's kind of like his magnum opus, that's some wildlife biologist, but he's kind of explaining that, what's the sheep in Siberia?
The snow sheep.
Yeah,
there's a couple different subspecies. I think,
you kind of have to imagine
too.
this band of sheep.
Yep.
Right, that would be uninterrupted.
Yep.
So at a time if you went back to the Pleistocene when you could walk from Siberia to Alaska, there's just this band of sheep, and it would go from Siberia into Mexico.
Yeah.
Right, all down through Yukon Territory, all the Canadian Rockies, down, and this thing would kind of peter out in Mexico, and they would if you were to walk that journey, you'd have probably recognized it as they kind of gradually changed.
Yeah.
They started out big and burly and dark, and they end up smaller and white.
Yeah, small. Yeah, well, because the snow sheep are even smaller typically than Dall sheep, from what I understand. Which it may have been this guy here, Wayne Heimer, who was a longtime sheep research biologist in Fairbanks, was kind of like the, one of the original sheep management and research biologists in the state of Alaska at all.
Yeah, Tyler brought me this book, Dall Sheep Management in Alaska from Pleistocene to Present, by Wayne E. Heimer.
Yeah. So these sheep are all throughout Alaska, and see, we're picking a spot to start with the situation now. So it's a little bit of history. After statehood, before statehood, when Alaska was a territory, fishing wildlife was managed by the feds because state didn't exist then. And at statehood,
what was So prior to statehood, there was no sort of territorial game management agency.
No, it was all the feds. And frankly, Wayne talks in his book about how a lot of this management, quote unquote, was guesswork. They didn't really know. Nobody knew what we really had, except for certain areas closer to populations, towns and whatnot. And so they didn't know what we had in the early on. I think even in the territorial days, they had a 3/4 curl rule for shooting rams, which that was just borrowed from bighorns. That's what they did for bighorns. They just this might work. And over Wayne's decades of research, they developed the full curl mature ram theory that and kind of goes along with Valerius Geist's sheep theories to develop the full curl management strategy, which is kind of if I don't remember touchback, I tend to, my brain kind of fires off in different directions a lot of times. So
no, you're good.
So Alaska becomes a state, gets title to the wildlife and the duty to manage them. And the next, like probably the biggest impact, to hunters was ANILCA and ANSCA, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, and the Alaska National Interest Land Conservation Act, which those were from what I understand, a trade-off to get the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. It was during the Carter administration. They discovered oil in Prudhoe Bay, needed a way to get that oil to market. So the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was the solution. And to get that, the Carter administration wanted all this federal land set aside, and for conservation purposes to protect it, which I think is a pretty good thing. So, and I don't know all the details. I wasn't around back then. This is I think it was finalized in 1980, but our two senators, Ted Stevens and Gravel, didn't like what Jimmy Carter wanted to take. I don't know all the details in that, but Carter basically told him, "You're going to give it to me, or you're going to come back in a year begging for me to take it." And they said, "You don't have," as Wayne describes, they told Carter that you don't have the balls. Well, he had the balls, and he signed an executive order. I think it was using the Antiquities Act, labeling, or details, but basically took subsistence hunting described it as an iniquity in this executive order and locked up huge portions of Alaska immediately. Like, you're going hunting there this fall? No, you're not. And my uncle describes this like he was going sheep hunting, and he was going to go sheep hunting in the Wrangles in a certain spot.
And this was a political move by Carter.
Yeah, to get ANILCA, to get the land set aside that he wanted for ANILCA, from what I understand.
Actually leveraged hunting access for a greater political victory.
Yeah, and it was a big impact to the economy too. It affected outfitters, resident hunters, everybody. And so, like, my uncle describes it as, he heard about this and then went to a state fishing game, and the state's official position was non-compliance. They told him, unless a Fed see you pull the trigger, have a nice hunt.
Oh, really? So these guys were in a real legit pissing match.
Oh yeah, big time. And after a year of that, they went and they gave him ANILCA. And so,
really?
Yep. They came back. He was right. He took it.
And that's how they ended up settling where they got the corridor.
Yeah,
I mean, they run that. I mean, just people understand. Like earlier, we were talking about how big Alaska is. I mean, I don't know what it is top to bottom.
Well,
I mean, just for like the Brooks Range is about the size of California.
Yeah, it's
right?
500 miles from Prudhoe Bay to Fairbanks.
Okay, and so that then it's got another
350. Maybe 300-ish miles. It depends on where you're measuring from and to. You could really.
But picture that you're trying to secure land. You're trying to secure rights to a corridor that is 1,000 miles. Almost 1,000 miles. Top to bottom.
I think the pipeline is 800 miles roughly.
Okay. Yeah.
But so it was a big deal, and they gave him ANILCA, and then so there were already some existing national parks, Denali, which was McKinley at the time, and a few others. So this created a bunch of new national parks: Wrangell, St. Elias, and Gates of the Arctic National Park up in the Brooks Range, and created. I'll let you take it. And it created a lot of also National Park Service managed preserve lands. It expanded, and I believe it also expanded. ANWR was in existence at the time, but I think that expanded it, and basically federalized or created all these refuges, parks, preserves, all this stuff.
Yeah, is it kind of the way I've understood it? I never knew this thing about how they settled it, but the way I've understood it is that move forced a lot of people to decide how they're going to carve the pie up.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And they had formalized ownerships. Okay, so all this federal land, some will be this, some will be that. The state's going to get this.
And then the
Native Alaskans are going to get their, and it forced a sort of codification of who owned what in that state.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's just the base layer to it. Then you get into another layer of management styles and principles and how to describe it. You get into the preservationist versus conservationist mentalities. So ANILCA effectively, a lot of, and there's still the people that were around, do not like Jimmy. You don't want to bring up Jimmy Carter around them because they've got some
still
pretty
sore
hard
subject.
Oh, very sore. And And a lot of people don't understand why, but that's why they just took it.
Yeah.
And, the result of even just Wrangell St. Elias and Gates of the Arctic National Park, Gates of the Arctic at the time, they figure had 6,000 to 10,000 sheep. So just they cut a huge chunk out of what hunters could access.
The least visited national park.
Yeah.
Dude, to be honest with you,
sense.
it makes zero sense, but it's a national park. It makes zero sense.
And a lot of this country, I'm fully behind protecting it. Like I don't want to destroy or see all that stuff destroyed, but let us use the freaking land.
Listen, man, yeah, but it's been. I mean, hunting has nothing to do with that.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Let people.
It's like
use,
the most ridiculous land use.
Oh, for sure.
Would have zero implications.
Yeah. And in fact, like where the world record Dall sheep was killed is now in the hard park, Wrangell St. Elias National Park. And
oh, is it really?
Yeah, there's a guy at Ram Glaciers where Swank killed that ram. And since that, you would think, oh, well, there's got to be all sort of those rams running around in there, and that's not the case anymore. Since that became a national park, I mean, people quit using it as much. There's still some subsistence allowances, like if you live in Glen Allen or some of these other little towns, you can hunt the hard park, but you can't. The access is extremely restricted.
Can you explain? This is a term I hear Alaskans use all the time. Can you explain hard park?
Okay, so no, so
explain it like you're taught. Like explain it like if it was Yellowstone.
Yeah. So I know nothing about Yellowstone, but you have Yellowstone National Park, which is hard national park.
Yep.
You cannot hunt there.
Don't hunt it.
You gotta have a bear-proof food container in your backpack. You gotta, all these. The list goes on for rules.
It's the hard park.
The hard park. So the preserve is technically part of the park, but it has allowances for the general public to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
They still got some pretty silly rules, but you can hunt preserve land.
Hunt it.
The takeaway is you can hunt preserve land. You can't hunt hard park land generally.
I'm a soft park man myself.
Oh, I'm
Yeah, you guys got so many terms that like
I'm just rattling off, and
I love it. But yeah, it's like when I'm talking to friends of mine up there and they talk about like the hard park, and I always look to people that I have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm like, I wonder if they're going to ask what he's talking about, and
they never do. No, well I'm glad you asked that, because with a lot of Alaskan issues, there's a big disconnect between understand like what's some of the details and context of what goes on up there versus what the general outside, as we call it, public knows.
That's another term, the outside.
Yeah, like I'm a stranger in a strange land right now.
I was telling the other day that this country I was telling my buddy Danny, who's from Hawaii, Danny Bolton. I was telling him that this country hasn't effectively integrated Hawaiians and Alaskans yet because they're so bad at lower 48 geography. They're like, I don't know. I was like, give me a state that borders Illinois. Idaho? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would be at that point if my kids weren't learning some geography stuff.
Oh, yeah, you look over their shoulder now and then and learn a thing or two about geography.
They got this states game that we've been playing, and luckily has a reference map. So anyway, so that's what a hard park versus soft park.
Yep. Then
you have wildlife refuges, which are, and all the parks and preserves are managed by the National Park Service. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manages refuge lands, and there's a shit pile of those.
About 13% of the state.
A lot.
Yeah.
And
that's been an issue we've spent a bunch of time on covering over the years, is the whipsaw of the feds overriding states' wildlife management practices on refuge land.
Yep.
Meaning
refuge and preserved land.
The whipsaw of the feds saying, well, we're gonna take away management practices you have traditionally exercised on portions of your land. Like Obama brought it in, Trump brought it out.
That was the whole killing bears in their dens thing.
It was just like the most.
Like,
it was like
shit.
such a
So steer me back to sheep.
No, I want to get back to sheep. But no, this is all essential to understand this whole thing, which is a really complicated but interesting thing that I think. Remember earlier I was saying your kids are going to hear a lot more about the dams and on the Columbia than you will, because your kids are probably going to see some of those dams come out. if you're listening now, that's just my crystal balling. My crystal balling is you're going to see that what Tyler is talking about in Alaska is going to become more and more of an issue in the American West and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Meaning this sort of going from on an ethnic standpoint, who has access to,
Well, and initially, when I was actually talking with Wayne about this the other day, when they were first drafting ANILCA, because ANILCA brings in subsistence use.
Yep.
And initially it was, Wayne said initially the language was race oriented for subsistence use. And then they're like, all right, well, in our modern world, that's not okay. And so they basically the primitive search and replace with location based or where, where you live. So a funny story. I actually was listening to that episode where you guys were talking about the latest back and forth. I was listening to it while I was sitting in a blind in Alberta over a bait pile waiting for a pack of wolves.
Oh,
and I was interrupted by a pack of wolves that showed up. And despite my, my delusions of being a Frank Glazer, I only hit 2 of them.
Oh,
but, so one thing you talked about the administrations, I think, do have some to do with it, but I think that it's more of a factor of what people in place at the agencies in Alaska are restricted from or allowed to do by an administration.
Got it.
I don't think Joe Biden's a mastermind, deciding he's going to push this.
He's not sitting there yes, on den digging, he's not personally making his decisions.
No. Yeah. But what it is I think, well, in this case, it was the back and forth is just exhausting. But, when under the Obama administration, it was all preserve National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service managed lands. And then it got reversed. And then this time, I believe it was just the Park Service pushing it.
Okay.
But I think that's a matter of just the Park Service saying, look, we can get away with this right now.
Yep.
Because they generally, and I know there's a lot of good people that work for the federal agencies, so take it with a grain of salt, but there's the axis of evil of sorts. The Park Service is kind of the most restrictive or worst one when it comes to allowing hunter access. And they've got a long history of let's say managing for minimum human interference with the landscape.
Yep.
Is a politically correct way to put it, I think. And so they do that through regulation, and some of it has, there's stuff you'd see in U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but the key is, I think it depends. It's more depending on the people that are in place in different positions at these agencies in Alaska than an administration telling them what to do.
But there is a real trickle down because the heads of these agencies are appointed by the administration.
The Department of Interior, Secretary of the Interior does have a lot to do with it, and they'll, I'm sure there's some.
And the head of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is an appointee.
For sure. So, and this whole appointed position thing trickles down to the Federal Subsistence Board and the issues we're dealing with them. But
we're going to get into that.
Yeah,
that's where all this is headed. But you got to understand, this is great. Don't be embarrassed about the level of detail because this is a very complicated wildlife management thing, and it's educational. For
sometimes I have to just take a break from it because it's just depressing and tired to keep up with all of it. And that's part of the tough thing about it. The fight is you can't it's too much for any one person to keep up with.
Yeah. It's speaking of the fight, is this while all this is going on, is Alaska Fish and Game's perspective man, this is just not a fight we can win. It's not worth
they're trying, I think there are some, I'm not aware on the specifics of them, but there are I know they have lawsuits and they're that's their only recourse.
Right.
But their position is that it's illegal what the feds are doing, that the state has title to all the wildlife and the responsibility for managing it. And it's just, to me, looking at as each one of these federal closures rolls out, to me, it doesn't add up. And we can get into that too, but the A plus B equals C, does not equal C.
Yeah. We'll get to the moves that are happening around Dall sheep.
So Dall sheep,
but also get into the, there's the issue of severe winters
yeah.
and low numbers, but then there's also the suspicion that that's being like exploited for political gain.
Well, I think it absolutely is.
So, but tell that story.
So, doll sheet and backing up into the doll sheet management, I did recently get to go to a presentation kind of on the status of everything and some of the history by one of our current sheep research biologists. He laid out the history of since the data was being recorded of sheep hunter numbers and harvest. Harvest is basically the only hard data that we could find in a lot of those years because it was before surveys, and surveys is another interesting kind of sidebar to that. But so sheep have had a lot, the like caribou especially, they'll have population swings or any other big game animal in a relatively natural state. Their populations oscillate, and sheep are very sensitive to weather conditions. They don't dig for their food in the snow, so they're very dependent on windblown slopes for their feed in the especially late winter. And populations have been there was a big crash in the 30s, and there's been isolated just total crashes in 1990. There's an interesting diagram he gave of showing the number of sheep and sheep hunters climbing, basically to double what it is now of harvests and sheep hunters.
Was it really?
Yeah. I mean, it was, and this year, the last 2 years have been really low harvests, but, the numbers climb of hunters and harvest. And then 1990, it just there was a huge crash in the central Alaska range in 1990.
Oh, and you'll see that sheep population crash reflected in
the harvest data.
And in participation as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like now, there's half the sheep hunters participating now than there was 3 or 4 years ago.
And there's half the sheep, or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's the numbers have taken a hit. So the winters between 2021, 2022. No, so 2020, 2021, and then the following winter. Both had pretty statewide tough winter conditions, and it hammered on a lot of sheep populations, and it's not great news. The sheep populations are down pretty much statewide.
And there's an additional irritant about this, is you're talking about the way populations can recover, but it takes 10 years to grow a trophy ram.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like takes. I mean, you take a whitetail buck, you can have a smoker whitetail buck in 4 years.
Yeah.
But it's a slow process on
slow.
sheep, man.
And, in the way, the full curl, under what we'd call full curl management, whereas a ram is legal to kill once he's full curl or 8 years old, and there's some other criteria. But basically, 8-year-old rams are at the time in their life when they become dominant and take over most of the breeding, and then their mortality just shoots through the roof once they're 8.
Yeah, Steve has said it. They're at their peak, and then they're dead.
Basically, once they turn 8, they're on borrowed time.
Yeah, isn't that wild though?
Yeah. Oh, it's
there's
crazy.
There's no old man period.
No. It's
you're on top of your game. It'd be like if dudes died at 38.
Well, I just turned 38, so yeah.
So Tyler, with these sheep declines, is there anyone pointing a finger at hunter harvest as any kind of impact, or is that not?
So that's yes and
playing
no.
A role.
Yes and no. So that does play into some of the excuses used for closing these areas. And there, some areas got hit harder than others, and some areas already have been experiencing a ton of pressure compared. So for the amount of hunters that are out there, there's fewer legal rams running around. Wainheimer, the Fish and Game, all those biologists, they are doing studies right now. They started a study this year to compare a hunted area versus a non-hunted area that are basically side by side to compare this ram mortality. So some of these people are taking Geist's theory and what Heimer kind of verified, that if you remove all the mature rams from the landscape, as we're in Heimer's study area in the central Alaska range during the 3/4 curl days, there was not any full curl rams running around really. And they observed a higher mortality in younger rams, understandably, because they're more disorganized. They're less, I don't even know that they're less able to cope with the breeding, because the older rams tip off pretty quickly too. But they're, nobody's buying it, and the position is that hunting under a full curl regulation has zero impact on the
That's what I was
recovery.
getting at,
Has
yeah.
zero impact. And Heimer's stuff showed it because they went from 3/4 curl to, with a lot of resistance, to 7/8 curl, which was kind of a compromise between 3/4 and full. And then they moved to full curl, and then people were afraid that you make these restrictions, there's going to be a lot fewer harvestable rams. Well, after a few years, boom, then you're at a different level.
Yeah.
And it's a lot healthy in like this.
I've only ever known that world during the full curl.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the full curl era.
And I still kind of think of myself as a pretty young sheep hunter. I've been doing it for 20 years every year. And I just feel dumber every year. I feel like there's more I got to learn about them. But so the hunt, like it's in the federal side, people will argue, which I'll get into that. So you had the Federal Subsistence Board, which I think is kind of, the more they get, the more the box is opened up, and they can, and people are seizing these opportunities. So the Northwest Arctic caribou herd, I don't know if you guys have talked about that closure, which that's a closure that doesn't make any sense. They closed it to non-locals because, and that's a whole nother layered thing. They closed it to non-local hunters because,
which is basically like a quadrant of the state.
Oh yeah, huge. I think they didn't get it in the northern unit 26, but a huge area. So I've hunted caribou in areas that are closed now. Yeah. The excuse was because the population is in decline, and it hit their survey conveniently with the margin of error, or the degree of certainty. The survey hit it on just under 200,000 animals, which a whole nother entity called that Northwest Arctic Herd Working Group has in their they have like a rubric for different management levels and intensity of management and suggestions. They're just like a consultation group made up of a lot of different parties that can make recommendations for management. They don't have management powers, but so it hit this 200,000 level, and you're getting proposals from this regional council that makes recommendations to the Federal Subsistence Board, which it's like a carbon copy sort of the state's model, where they have regional advisory committees. These ones are councils. So they get this proposal and they've happened, but they get this proposal to close the area to non-local hunters because, they cite because the herd's in decline, so in theory, a reason would be to recover numbers, and because they assert that non-local hunters are impacting and diverting the caribou's migration, which I wrote a story on this. I talked to the National Park Service biologist who did a lot of this study up there, and he said there's no evidence to support it.
Yeah. And
the driver, if you learn anything about caribou herds, and like a lot of animals, the drivers of populations are the mature cows. Mature cows have calves, and calf recruitment, those are the two most important things. So non-local hunters kill about 300 bulls per year, whereas they estimate subsistence harvest at about like 10 to 14,000 animals, which that subsistence resource is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that, but just the equation doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so they close it to non-locals, but they don't even make any recommendations to stop shooting cows and calves. So it just doesn't add up. It's like
you're taking advantage of the situation to remove an annoyance.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do with the resource.
And I could get my tinfoil.
My life would be better. My life would be better if there weren't non-locals here.
Yeah, and this is getting a little. And I understand those sentiments, and they exist in a lot of places out there. But
it's ubiquitous.
You could get a little tinfoil hatty, but I've been told by guys like this that have been around and seen this whole process that you're not crazy to suspect that there's some interplay between the agencies and these committees and crafting these proposals.
Oh,
so, and it gets worse. So the caribou one happens, then, all of a sudden sheep are in trouble.
So just to put like a very clear point on it, just so people that who don't follow this issue, you're normally trying to think how. Okay, if you look at a normal wildlife resource, like from a lower 48 perspective, you look at a normal wildlife resource, you might imagine the pie being divided up between what they call recreational hunters and fishermen and commercial use. Okay, so let's say we're going to go out to the East Coast. We're going to go to the East Coast, Chesapeake Bay, and we're going to look at like some fishery. It'd be that there's the recreational harvest and the commercial harvest, right? And those two on some resource. And those two entities are going to be at odds. They're going to be just generally going to be arguing over who gets a bigger piece of the pie, right? The commercial, the recreational industries are going to fight like, we want more fish. You're messing up our fishing. You're inflicting on our ability to make a livelihood. This tension always exists all over the place. In the Rocky Mountain West and lower 48, there's constant tension between, it's not ugly necessarily, but there's tension between outfitter, okay, and non-outfitted. So it's a minor issue, but there's outfitters who are like, we would like to have more permits so we can do more guiding and have more clients. And then non-guided hunters are saying, we would like to have greater animal tag allocation go to us and not peeling off so much for the guides. Or the conflict could be, you have state residents and non-residents, and that's a tension. Meaning state residents, like you're letting too many non-residents come in and hunt. It's impacting,
setting aside X percent of tags for non-residents.
Yeah, like why I've been applying for a sheep tag for 30 years. How could a non-resident get a sheep tag? And when I live here, I never got a sheep tag. All these sources of tension. In Alaska, you have this additional layer of subsistence. So, the same way you have like local, non-local, commercial, recreational, you have this element of people that live in rural areas having a right to subsist and having a different set of regulations that would govern your fishing practices. For instance, where Seth and I have shacks in Southeast Alaska, and we fish under a set of regulations. But if we were to move there and live there and make that our legal address, we would all of a sudden fish under completely different. We can set long lines for halibut, right?
Yeah, and keep species that we can't keep.
We set
now.
like 100 hook skate for black cod, whatever. And right now you're allowed 8 a year, but you have unlimited black cod harvest if you live there. So it's just this added source of tension.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like fighting over the pie. Right?
Yeah, and it's as an example of how silly some of it has nothing to do with how much wild game you eat. And I will say again, like I think protecting
nothing to do with your income,
protecting the subsistence lifestyle and just the ability to hunt is important. But I can't hunt spring waterfowl. I live right outside of Fairbanks. If I move 30 miles down the road, I can hunt spring waterfowl when they're all nice and fully plumed up and. It's a sore subject, and I'm not even a duck hunter. So.
At high level, like many issues, at high level, the sort of bifurcation of subsistence and non-subsistence makes you get it. Makes tons of sense. But like anything, when you get down into like you mean so if I move across the road?
yeah, literally, and also
like I could have a salary of $1 million a year, and I could move across the road, and I'd be subsistence.
Yep, exactly.
But I'm
completely
like dirt poor on this side of the road, and I'm not subsistence.
Yeah. No, that's exactly how it is. And to complicate that, well, there's what feds consider subsistence user, and the state considers all residents a subsistence user, but they generally their goal is to satisfy the subsistence needs of state residents through the sport hunting and fishing regulations.
Yeah.
So they closed this. The Northwest Arctic herd, Unit 23 for caribou and moose. It's not completely closed.
Oh yeah, I was doing my big wrap up, my big explanation.
Oh, sorry.
No. You brought me back on track.
Okay.
So, but like, I mean, thousands of square miles, right?
Oh yeah. I can't remember. At one point, I added it up. It was like 60 million acres or something like that.
So meaning if you're...
Wait, you said they closed it for moose too?
Yeah, for moose and caribou for non-locals during... Basically, it's not year-round because like I, in the winter, could go up there and hunt caribou, but during the time when everybody is wanting to travel up there and hunt in the fall.
Yeah.
And
they say moose are on the decline
the decline out there, but Corinne had given me an article... by Seth Cantner, who I think he lives up on the Kobuk, and he has some books, and like he offers like his perspective, and you hear this a lot, and like the anecdotal stuff and observations over time I think are important, but you also have to look at a larger context. Me being an outsider, like if I can understand someone living there who for years and years and years, there's thousands of caribou came right through down this trail every single year. We could count on it. Like I would feel very strongly about it too, but being on the outside, not really having any fingers in that pie, you look at historically, like, well, that herd wasn't always that big.
Yeah.
And in 1975, there was only 75,000 of them. I think it was the roughly date and number that I looked at, because you look at that working group has some newsletter publications, and you can, pretty easily skim valuable like details from that and some of the historical context. But they even have in some of their newsletters, they have quotes from some of the elders that talk about remembering when there was no caribou out there and they just had reindeer, and then the caribou started showing up and pulling the reindeer. They would start shooting all the caribou that came because they didn't want them to take the reindeer with them, and they did. But there never used to be caribou come out, or at least for a X period of time, there never was caribou that came out on the Seward Peninsula like that out of that herd.
Yeah.
And the Park Service biologist, Kyle Jolie, I think was his name, he told me that, because I kind of posed the question, I was like, well, what do you think? And he was very tactful in how he answered, not like definitively, but just giving me some context. I'm like, well, do you, half expecting it to be climate change, because that's what a lot of people will dive onto,
sure,
as you guys have been talking about.
Yeah.
That's the popular, like monetarily beneficial culprit. But
yeah, it's a catch-all, and as deserving of a conversation it's become a catch-all to explain everything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always explain everything.
No. And the way he put it was, he said, think about this. He said, he didn't blame climate change. He said, think about this. That herd changes in size and number. He said, when a caribou herd grows exponentially, it expands its range. When it shrinks, the range and migration patterns shrink too.
Yeah.
So that's just in a lot of these issues, like the overall length of time you look at in context. And I've learned a ton just by reading about some of the sheep management history. But so this closure happens, and then we have a couple bum winters and the sheep are hurting. And then up pops another proposal, which, I want to be careful because I don't know the guy, and I don't want to be careful. I want to be careful not to just sling mud, but on paper, the Central Brooks Range closure is the result of one guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of a leader of a small community there in Wiseman, and their council wrote this proposal that is not scientific at all. Basically says, I drive the road and all the mature rams are gone. There's nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think they have a pretty, it's right next to Gates of the Arctic National Park. And this is bordering hard park, national park land, where only subsistence hunters can hunt. And I don't think there's not very many of them that do it. Only like in an isolate, like at Anaktuvik Pass, I'm sure those guys subsistence hunt some sheep, but, and so they formalize this proposal, and the Federal Subsistence Board passes it, closing the whole Central Brooks Range on federal land. There's some small state land portions, but most of it it locked up. And the only reason given is, that the sheep are on the brink and they need, we surveyed them, which the state and the feds do their aerial surveys differently. Like that's a whole another subject, but they close all this up, which includes, it's the most like user-friendly. I killed my first sheep hiking in up there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
On that pass?
In 2004 when I was 18. So they closed like the best like walk-in access opportunity. It's not that walk-in guys are killing a bunch of sheep. The success rate's low, just in general. And there's some areas that people will fly in that kind of within that area.
And you see horse trailers parked in there.
Yeah. But the opportunity is there. And they also closed the corridor, which extends 5 miles on either side of the Dalton Highway, that's bow hunting only. And that's the heart of where he's talking about. There's no mature rams left. At least that's the way his proposal reads.
For context, like how many Dall sheep are in Alaska, and how many get killed by hunters a year?
So I don't know that the current and historic population estimates, but I can tell you at up to a peak in 1990, I want to say it was like a couple thousand sheep getting killed a year. And then it's gone down to this year. They don't know that it's even going to break 400.
Are you serious?
Yeah. But with that in mind, and it's like the situation's not great. It's a hard time to be a sheep hunter in Alaska. But the relationship there's a linear relationship between the number of hunters and the number of harvest. Wayne, in my discussion with him the other day, he talked to one of the wildlife troopers who, take it with a grain of salt, but their impression was that the success rate in Unit 20A, which is Central Alaska Range, it's a very hard hunted area, that the success rate was relatively pretty much like normal, and the age structure of rams that's been getting killed is the same as it always has been.
My brother who lives in Alaska and he likes to hunt sheep, he said when you look at harvest data, a lot of times it tells you more about the weather than it does sheep populations.
Absolutely, it can, yeah.
Meaning, we've hunted up there in years when you just have these massive systems that just make poor visibility.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, you'll then see that reflected, and you'll see that reflected in how many rams are getting
for sure.
Brought in, and you can't, and you look and you want to try to draw these sort of like population trends out of things that could have been like, it was cloudy.
Yeah, or it was smoky.
Yeah.
Like we had a lot of late wildfires this year, and a lot of country was smoky. But over time, like the data, it's pretty consistent. It's not like an enormous amount of younger rams are getting clipped off or sublegal rams. Like the percentages are all pretty much in line with what they have been historically. Do
you think it'd make it all, if the stuff that is getting closed to, if the stuff that's getting closed to hunters, do you think it'd make it like this discussion a moot point if sheep numbers improved and they actually opened this landscape back up again? Or do you think this is just like a play and that's how it is now?
I think it's a play. I think theoretically, in most sheep hunters, any serious sheep hunter, if there was strong evidence to show that, hey, if we stop hunting these sheep right now, the population is going to recover quicker. Now and you get into like, you have to kind of define what you're talking about because
they are still hunting.
Because talking to a biologist whose interest is like maximum sustainable yield, just wanting to have huntable populations and looking out for the well-being in general of the sheep as a whole. He's going to be talking about one thing. The guy, some of the very hardcore sheep hunters up there that are like intensively like self-managing sheep they find and have been, in spots have been for years. The guys that are saying like, I don't want to shoot a ram unless he's 10 years old and has reached his potential or he's genetically inferior. Like, they get really into it. There may not be, with a lot of pressure under the full curl rule, there may not ever be a huge abundance of giant rams, but there's going to be huntable rams. And even a lot of like Wayne and a guy named Joe Want have been doing recording like age studies for harvested rams to show that, and part of this age structure thing, that if a ram's harvested when he was 10, he was legal the year before, and he was legal the year before that, to kind of get it's got an extrapolation, but you kind of have an idea of, all right, well, how many more legal rams were out there after the season? They've just been able to pretty much punch holes in the argument that we're killing every ram as soon as it gets, we're clipping them all off.
Let me explain a thing you just said, because this is interesting too. A ram can become legal. So in the general management areas, a ram can be legal 3 ways. He gets full curl. And what that means is if you're looking at him in profile, his horn describes a 360-degree circle. So like imagine a curled ram's horn. The tip comes around and appears from a side view to join up to the base.
Mm-hmm.
Or he's 8 years old. And that would be that you count annuli, because they don't always grow they don't always grow in a tight curl. Like they can grow in this wide spiral where they're never going to hit full curl. Or not never, but they'll be 8 years old, but not full curl. And the only way you'd know he's 8 is there's these things called ANILCA. They have a growth ring. And if you know what you're doing, and you really need to know what you're doing, this like to shoot a ram off of growth rings,
it's risky.
You got to study.
Yeah.
You got to look at a lot of sheep and really know how to use optics and all that. But you can theoretically, and that's beyond theoretically, you can count growth rings and kill a ram that's 8 years old. Thirdly, that ram can braid off or snap off the tips of his horns. And it has to do it in a way that there's a thing on a ram's horn called a lamb tip. So it's its first year growth. It used to not be clearly explained, but it's clearly explained in the regulation. It has to grind away or snap off that whole tip.
Mm-hmm.
If he does it on both sides, he's never going to become full curl. And then he becomes legal. But young ones don't really do that.
Or you can't count on them because you could never fairly judge whether they would have been full curl or not. Like there's some slack, but generally,
and that's called a double broomer.
Double broomer, and it's a lot of times older rams will be like that. So
what Tyler's talking about is if you go and you look and be like, people are shooting full curl rams. There's still legal lambs on landscape. And meaning if you shoot a full curl and you count his age rings, his growth rings, he's got 10 annuli. He's been legal and not dead. For 2 years.
And they'll also measure horn segments to show that, hey, this ram has been full curl. Because you can look at them and judge like how long. But so
he slipped through the cracks as a full. They might look at a ram and be like, he was managing to slip through the cracks as a full curl ram. So every ram that's full curl is not getting killed.
No, not even remotely. There may be on a macro level, there may be this creek. There's no legal rams in right now, but on a large scale, that regulation protects that younger age structure, younger rams generally. And, that like you get some weird, sometimes, you get a real young ram that just has tremendous growth. And I've told myself I don't want to shoot another 7-year-old ram, but if there's a 7-year-old ram that I think's over 40 inches, I'm probably going to pop him.
Got it.
I'll make that sacrifice.
But you're not interested in a 7-year-old that had a tight curl and threw a full curl.
That's just legal.
When these closures are happening on federal land, what's happening on state land with Alaska Fish and Game? Like, have they adjusted their management style? Or
they're still, their management style is the same, and there's different issues that can be contentious. Different guy out on state land. Outfitters are not held to an exclusive area where only they can outfit there.
Right.
So you get some conflict like that. But the takeaway is that in these areas for decades, that full curl route through a lot of big population swings and crashes and booms has shown that it allows the sheep to recover back to that healthy level. Just by, you may have hard hunting for a few years, but you have the opportunity to go and harvest a ram that is a surplus to the population and not feel bad about it because you're not having any sensible effect on the population itself.
I want to hit another point here, which I think gets a little bit to the crux of the issue, and you've spoken on it a bit, but I'm going to tee this comment up by talking about something that happens in our own state here in Montana. In the early 2000s, around 2000, there's a region of the state, like the state's broken up into these the state of Montana is broken up into 7 regions. And then each region is broken up into all kinds of units, so they can manage wildlife on a very micro level. And a unit they use the term unit,
district.
Right? District. Sorry, regions are broken up into districts. The district could be like a drainage, right?
Yeah.
So you have broadly, it's the state of Montana, 646 miles east to west. The state's divided into 7 regions, and each of those regions has dozens of districts. Sometimes dozens of districts. Meaning there's micromanagement occurring. In 2000, 2001, 2002, in Region 7, they were giving out something like 13,000 pronghorn tags. every one of those 13,000 people that would draw a pronghorn tag could buy up to 2 doe tags, pronghorn doe tags.
Mm-hmm.
So in those years, I was going out pronghorn hunting usually with 3 tags in my pocket. Numbers are down. They're not down because of habitat destruction, they're down because of weather issues, predation, weather, like variables, right? Not like wholesale destruction of habitat. And what is it now? 7,000, 9,000? Okay. No one's walking around with 2 doe tags in their pocket. Some number are walking around with a doe tag in their pocket, but they've cut almost in half the allocation. Now, I'm not sitting here saying they're stripping my rights. It's like I have a lot of faith that these allocations are reflective of the situation on the ground. Meaning I have faith in my state fish and game agency, that my state fish and game agency is doing a generally great job of counting wildlife, making an assessment about what the harvest rate can be and doing it. And I would look and be like, hey, my pronghorn hunting opportunities, they've been cut in half.
Sure, but
oh, go on.
Well, it's easy to look at it and be like, well, what they've cut doe tags, right? So I feel like
and general tags.
Tags.
Because the general tag is either sex.
You can't just go kill does wholesale anymore, which is how you keep numbers where you want them, right?
Yeah. But the point I'm making is there's been a massive reduction in the amount of pronghorn hunting opportunities, but it's reflective of the situation on the ground.
Yep.
Meaning, if we get like prime conditions and pronghorn numbers skyrocket, I have a lot of faith that tag allocation will skyrocket.
Yep.
What we're talking about here with this is like a problem here is people don't have that faith. Because rather than it being like, oh, it's going to a draw, it's going to this, it's going to that, it's just like shutting down huge chunks of ground.
Yep.
And there's not a lot of faith that they're going to turn it back on.
No, and it
winds up being like one of these situations where, like as you demonstrated, non-resident caribou hunters up in that northwest quadrant of the state killing 300 bulls or something like that.
It's insignificant.
Meaning someone's looking and they're saying, there's a thing I want to happen. I'm going to use this. I'm going to bullshit everybody and use this thing I want to happen and make a thing I want to happen, but I'm going to do it under a dubious justification. Meaning I'm going to do it by talking about something other than what I'm talking about.
I think that's exactly what's happening.
And it's hard to have faith that sheep numbers will improve and that 5 years from now, they're going to be like, welcome back, hunters.
Well, and even, and it was a 2-year closure. Well, I mean, anything could happen, obviously, but I don't think anybody's expecting it to open up because it's not, and hunters tend to, I think, and sheep hunt, like, we tend to want to grab at any solution that's going to flip a switch and bring it back, make it right immediately. And it's not going to happen like that. It's going to take a long time. But just by the nature of it.
Yeah. The only way to really find out on the issue is to wait and get out of these sort of like dull sheep dark ages and have some recovery and then stand back and say, okay, things are looking better.
Yeah.
What's going to happen now?
But I think, as far as if you're looking at what we can look at to justify doing this or not doing this, we've been through sheep crashes and had even through like more, liberal hunting.
You hunted your way through. They've hunted their way through
them, and like it just the data that we have shows whatever you want to say concludes that hunting is just doesn't play an impactful part on the overall sheep as a whole.
Yeah, meaning like when you send a hunter into the mountains, that hunter can only get one thing. He can get a full curl ram.
Yep.
A full curl ram's a dead man walking.
Exactly.
It is not the thing that's driving that population.
The last number I can find is like roughly 40,000 sheep. And if they killed 400.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's not
that's 1%, right?
Yeah, no, it's a very small percentage of the sheep population that gets killed. And so if one guy, and this is why it's all very suspicious to me, and I think there's some cahoots. And my personal opinion is that the Federal Subsistence Board had their mind made up before they ever even got the proposal.
Sure.
At the recommendation of one guy who's just says, I drive the road and don't, and all the rams are gone.
I've read your writing about his reports.
Yeah. So it doesn't add up. And you want to go a step further. This year, 2023, a few days before the season, the feds surveyed the Yukon Charlie, the 40-mile country, Tanana uplands. And the Park Service comes out with this announcement that they're requesting an emergency closure of the federal preserve lands on the Charlie River in the 40-mile country. And because they're
getting mighty personal.
And, and it was a as a result because
closure for sheep.
Yeah, for sheep hunting because their survey numbers were so low. And I'll just hint at Wayne Heimer, who's flown a lot of sheep surveys, and any guy that's flying surveys, or if you're flying around a cub looking for sheep, you are not seeing all the sheep that are there. Wayne, told me estimates that in his sheep surveys, he figured he was seeing at most 60% of the sheep that were there. So there's that tidbit. There's just a lot of
you gotta make sure you're not flying into the side of a mountain.
Yeah. And they're like, I can sit at a mountain, look at a mountain or up a drainage all day and not see a damn thing. And then 8 o'clock in the evening, boop, sheep. So it's fallible, but they do this survey.
It's imperfect, but it's like the best you can do.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Right.
And so they survey this, and for people that don't know, that Yukon Charlie area is it's marginal sheep country. There's spots of sheep country, and the population is historically sparse. There's been sheep there for as long as anyone has known, but they're not concentrated. It's not like the Alaska Range.
You'd think that there weren't.
Yeah.
I remember being surprised with pilots pointing and saying I saw a ram there one time. Yeah. That's how much had to walk through the timber to get there.
Well, and something to consider when you're saying, you're seeing the conclusions they come to with this survey. Those sheep are sparse and they're down in the trees a lot. And you just find them in I know old timers that have hunted and flown it for 50 years. And they're you'll find them in the weirdest spots. So you have all that to consider, but we need to close this area, and it averages 1.4 rams per year killed in the entire area. Basically, they
saved that 1.4 rams.
Yeah, it's again there's nothing.
No.
And not only
it's a play, dude. It's a play.
It is, because not only it's an emergency closure. Not that I don't believe that they give much about public input anyway, other than they have to sit and listen to it. Sometimes, no public input. They just closed it. And
it's funny. My buddy flying through that country one time. My buddy showed me a spot where he picked up 2 deadheads.
Yeah,
because he saw all the blood in the snow.
Yeah,
and some wolves had killed 2 rams. It's funny, that little incident was more rams than hunters kill.
Yeah.
How
it is.
How much of an impact? I mean, this subject is do you think wolves are playing on these sheep?
I think predation is certainly an impact, and Fish and Game is considering how they do. You talk to and one of the things that people ought to keep in mind, they closed the Fish and Game, State Fish and Game went along with closing the entire western half of the Brooks Range a few years ago due to they had a weather event and sheep were low, and at least you kind of got to take everything with a grain of salt. But you talk to some old timers who remember, all the outfitters up there used to go airplane the heck out of wolves every spring, whether it was legal or not at the time. They just did it. And, whether that's the reason there was a big boom of sheep out there or not, you can take it for what it's worth, but it does play a factor, but it's kind of a case by case thing. Some coyotes in the Alaska Range are a big sheep predator, but, Brad Windling, our sheep, that current research biologist, talked about a study over a couple of years that a guy did observing lambs. One year, the leading cause of mortality was drowning because there was a lot of runoff.
Oh, no kidding.
And then the next year it was golden eagles.
Wow. Yeah, got you.
So it all plays a factor for sure. And I think, predator control is the one button that could feasibly pushed, although I don't think it would, in every case, would make the difference.
It's not necessarily going to move the needle.
But so they closed it a few days before the season for basically, and there's not even an established subsistence sheep hunt in there. So why is the subsistence board closing an area that doesn't have a subsistence sheep hunt? They said for possible future just some bullshit reason.
Yeah.
And the subsistence board
basically keep some aspirational sheep hunter from basically wasting his time in there.
Yeah.
Right.
And you I hate when I was on a roll, lost my train.
No,
of thought.
you're doing
so
good.
we, you close this area, and boy, I'll get it. Reminds me of a sheep hunting presentation I gave one time where my computer quit working.
Then you had to
front of,
remember.
like,
You
200
had to try to
people.
remember
No,
what you
I
were
had
talking about.
Yeah, it was sweating it then. But so where was that? They closed this area. So the subsistence board, you might think, oh, well, that's like some like democratically elected type of thing. All this federal subsistence board is the heads of, I believe, 5 agencies: Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, BLM, Forest Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and then I think it's 3 people that they appoint or someone at Interior appoints. So the voting majority of the federal subsistence board making these decisions is just the agencies. It's just them doing what they want to do, essentially.
This is my last question on this subject, and this is like total gut. Do you think it's being driven? Do you think it's being driven by anti-hunting sentiment, like what we're seeing in Colorado, what we're seeing in Washington, like by an animal rights agenda, or do you think it's being driven by a agenda of I don't want to deal with other people?
I think it's a little bit of both, but and it goes back to this seemingly long-standing mode of regulating to keep people, like regulating for minimal human use of the landscape.
Got it.
There was a excuse me, Dave's Killer Bread coming back to get me.
Kill you.
But so like an anecdote. Years ago, I remember one of the refuge manager for Anwar was trying to ban Vibram boot soles in Anwar because they tear up the tundra.
Yeah.
When the impact, it's just silly.
Did he get anywhere with that?
No, but no, he did not. But
got it.
Yeah,
like there's like a sentiment like that like to look at the landscape and see human, however ephemeral, and non-permanent, but like to see that level of human use is sort of like falls outside of what they feel is the best.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest,
which
crux
would be
of it.
Like a total preservationist.
Oh, and it's a
right?
preservationist. That's why you see kind of a tiering of it. The Park Service is the quote unquote worst, then Fish and Wildlife, then BLM, unless you're a small time miner. But
like hunting isn't, I don't even think like the kind of hunting we're talking about isn't incompatible with, like, unless you're 100% preservationist, hunting isn't incompatible with the preservationist perspective.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
But I want to have time to jump into another thing. Give me your take on what should happen with Anwar.
As far as the oil drilling stuff?
Yeah. Like, give me your take on how people, in your view, how should people sort of conceptualize Anwar, and what's your take on what should happen in Anwar?
I'm not even convinced at this point that we need to or should drill it. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I guess undecided. I don't see an imminent need to drill it right now. So
you mean from a national security perspective, from an economy perspective?
Economy, oil prices. I think in Alaska is a resource state for sure. And there's a balance to be struck between development of those resources and what we want to keep as untouched, or as what we perceive it to be untouched.
Yeah.
Like the area in Anwar that they, is kind of up for.
So Anwar, just to clarify, it's Arctic National Wildlife Reserve.
Yep. And so there's
been a long simmering.
The people from the state have been pushing to open this area 1002, they call it, which was set aside as for potential oil exploration and eventual drilling. And I don't want to talk out of my ass because I don't remember a lot of the details, but there was a book on the creation of Anwar and how that area was not originally supposed to be part of it. It could have been folded in there with ANILCA. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
the 1002 area.
Yeah, the 1002. So, and that area was completely seismic surveyed in the 80s. Like, as a lot of Alaska. People think of Alaska as being completely untouched. Man, there's seismic lines running everywhere.
Yeah.
And so
straight,
yep. Well, excuse me.
Tyler got into a bread seed stuck in his throat.
It's ironic that we got a coffin-shaped table here. Yeah. My good buddy and hunting partner, I call him Dr. Frank Schultz. He's not really a doctor, but that's
Got
a whole nother story. We were recently discussing, he had talked to someone who was actually, I think it was one of their family members or actually participated in this statewide survey, seismic survey lines where in the winter, they wait for the ground to freeze and drop the dozer blade and go.
Yep.
But different kind of subject. So I think the important thing, whether we end up drilling it or not drilling it, is just to look at a little more, there's a little more context around than what the general public knows. You get a lot of, or back when it was like kind of the hot button issue, you get a lot of like emotionally driven pictures and arguments made to be like, well, any reasonable person would oppose this. But they'll say like the caribou are of great concern, which they are, but there's these theories that it's going to decimate the porcupine caribou herd if we move into that area. Well, there's drill pads like 50 miles away, and the data that we, excuse me, I might not make it out of here alive, but the data or any like data we could look at 50 miles away, or I guess Prudhoe itself is more farther than that, but right next door, the Central Art occurred, exploded during the expansion of Prudhoe Bay oil fields and the pipeline. And there was a lot of worries. There's a lot of worries about what would happen with them. I mean, they built like sections of the pipeline that go underground for caribou to cross, because that was a big concern. They didn't know they'd never seen anything like that.
What they would do with the overhead structure. Yeah.
And as time has shown, they don't care. And they'll in fact like flock to the pipeline and a lot of the oil field buildings because the wind will run under them and get out of the bugs.
It's like you'd almost take it like a propaganda photo that came out of that time would be caribou getting in the shade of the pipeline.
Yeah, exactly.
People like, they love it.
And even Jim Reardon, who wrote Alaska's Wolfman and wrote a lot of stories for Outdoor Life over the years. I have the original copy of.
That's one of my favorite books of all time.
Me too. Yeah. It's phenomenal. So he wrote an article kind of pre-pipeline, like wondering what the heck's going to happen.
Jim Reardon did.
Yeah. It was a 2-part story. I've got the original copies of them, but
the caribou if caribou did well in Prudhoe Bay with the oil, it wasn't because of the oil. It wasn't just because it's a cyclical.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess someone could look and say it didn't have obvious negative impacts on an already cyclical thing. Yeah. And in fact, we saw the up-down cycle continue.
Yeah, I think you
still saw good peaks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at the very least you could say that has shown that they're not incompatible.
Yeah.
So there's, and that's one of the big arguments. And in kind of researching this stuff, a guy had sent me I think it was environmental impact study by the American Ecological Society. And their assertion was that the 3D seismic survey that would have to happen would be the riskiest part of the whole.
Got it.
Because they've got to roll this equipment around. But they did concede that the environmental regulations for conducting that are so strict that it should keep some of these things they're worried about happening from happening. And that's another thing. Like, people don't understand quite how restrictive the rules are, even in existing oil fields and stuff. I haven't worked up there a bunch. Back in my pipe covering days, I was on jobs up there and saw some of it. But a guy put it to me, it was a pretty good illustration. He said, if you're up there and you have a $500,000 piece of equipment and a seagull lands and makes a nest on there, you can't touch that piece of equipment till that seagull's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if you got to get another one shipped up there to use it for the time being. It doesn't matter. You can't touch it. You can't interact with it. Whereas a reasonable person would be like, all right, sorry about your luck this year, Mr. Seagull, Yeah. Or I guess it would be Mrs. Seagull, but
Mrs. Could be. Well, I don't know. I had to read up on seagull reproduction.
It's strange times these days.
Did the fact that they expanded into that willow oil field, did that take pressure off of the ANWR conversation about whether or not to move into ANWR?
It may have, and I think a lot of ANWR is just like used for political jostling as much as anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's like a very realistic possibility that it's going to happen anytime soon. And I don't know that it's needed, so
you feel it's like that argument is chilled out right now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that want it, and there's always going to be people who don't want it no matter what. But whether it even is like a relevant issue right now. Like I think there's bigger fish. To my opinion, it's kind of a distraction from, I think, the loss of hunting opportunity that's just like cascading throughout the state.
No,
is
I worry
more
about,
of an important issue to me.
Yeah, I worry about both those things, and the reason I worry about them in tandem, and I don't think it's like I worry about them both, but I worry about them both from the same perspective, is that I want there to be as much wildlife on the ground as possible, and I want hunters and anglers to have maximum access to that wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
So the restrictions, the seemingly arbitrary kind of conniving restrictions on hunting access bothers me, as does the loss of wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
So if I look at, like, from my perspective, if I look at a thing where you have a chunk of land that's not exploited,
Mm-hmm.
and it's cordoned off, and there's a basic understanding of it being unexploited, even outside of any like super detailed understanding of where the boundary lines and how the boundary lines were drawn and any fuzziness about that, I would just look and say, I will look from my perspective and say, theoretically, even though I might not understand every nuance of every drainage and all that, I would say if there's chunks of ground that aren't touched, I celebrate not touching them.
Yeah, and that's a logical thing.
In terms of just maintaining wildlife habitat, because however you put it, like, I don't think I like toy with the global perspective, but I more imagine like I look, sort of my perspective is very American, like the United States of America, right? And of course, I pay extra concern around my immediate area. And I do a lot of hunting in a particular state, so I look at the wildlife politics in that state.
Yeah.
I'm not an Alaskan, but I look at it as a place I love. It's part of a country that I love, and so I look at a thing like ANWR, and I'm like, man, I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to mess with it because I don't want to mess with any of the areas we have that aren't developed.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just for me, it's as simple. It's just as simple as, if there's big chunks of ground that aren't developed, I just hate to see them developed.
Yeah.
Because I think that down the road, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, I won't be around. But when weighing it out, I'm like, 200 years from now, that'll be celebrated. Like that decision of restraint. Yeah. And you look at, like, even to take something, and I don't want to make too much of a point about this, but you take something like what Theodore Roosevelt did. When he was creating the national forest system, he pissed everybody off. When he did the midnight forest, which is what, 20-some, he created 20-some, they didn't call them national forests at the time, forest preserves.
The exact number.
There was a bill moving through Congress that was going to strip him of an ability to create national forests. And he was going to veto it, but he knew sentiment against him was so high that if he vetoed it, his veto would be overridden.
Mm-hmm.
So they call him the Midnight Forest because his ability to create these things would expire at midnight. He then goes and creates like 24, 27 more preserves, and then wakes up in the morning and signs a bill saying he can't do it anymore. And what happens? They carve him on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like over long periods of time, I think that over long periods of time, that desire to create undeveloped areas and protect undeveloped areas is celebrated. But I'm so myopic in my interests and so myopic in my views that if you do all that and make it that people can't hunt it, it's not a win anymore.
No. I feel exactly
do you know what I mean? I'd be like,
way.
Well, yeah, you did, but you threw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people, man,
it's a win in some hazy, distant environmental way, perhaps, but like it's not the win I'm after.
Yeah,
the win I'm after is access for people who hunt and fish.
Yeah, and sometimes that access is going to be tough, but at least you have the opportunity.
Theoretically, whether or not you go there or not. Like, I don't know. I never have hunted the Frank Church. Never hunted the Frank Church, the celebrated wilderness area that we have in the lower 48. I never hunted there. I wouldn't be surprised if I died and never hunted there. I like it being there. I would be livid if they tried to strip hunting rights from it, but I've never been there.
Yeah. No,
Probably never, it's just like, I like knowing it's there.
Yeah.
It's a win that it's there. It's a win that you can hunt it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a totally reasonable way to look at it too. I think just when, and not arguing for or against, because a lot of these these potential projects and whatnot that come up, I'm not even necessarily for them or against them, or I kind of lean that way where I don't want to see development that's not necessary or is going to be irresponsibly done or what that. But yeah, I feel the same way that what good, not necessarily that it's not good to have that land, but if I can't hunt it or you're taking my opportunity to hunt it, so a few guys can have a private playground.
Understood. Yeah. What was your take on, this is kind of like another one that sort of went away. What was your take on Pebble Mine? That was the thing that generated enormous amounts of interest from outsiders.
Yeah, it was
outside
huge.
of Alaska. How did you sit on that?
I generally I leaned against it. I didn't have like a firm, but it's like, it seemed like, and talking to people who live in the area and like have a lot of vested interest, like personal interest, it probably was not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
but you didn't view it as that this is the thing that will break Alaska.
No. So
now, what's your take on? What's your position on Ambler Road?
I'd say I'd lean more against it because for one, they're not going to offer any public access supposedly, but they did say that with the pipeline or the haul road. Initially, that was not a public access road.
And initially, it was not planned to ever be.
No. Yeah. It was just strictly an oil company road, or oil resources road. So yeah, at that point, my outlook is like, well, do we really need this here right now?
And it's not going to increase your access anyway.
It's not going to increase my access. If there was a firm plan to allow some hunter access, I'd be okay for it. I would be more willing to tip you more. It might, yeah.
At least create like a win.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a road outside of Fairbanks. You guys drove right by it to Pogo Mine.
Yep.
And it's not near as long a road or through as controversial a territory. But I remember guys when they first put that road in would take their four-wheelers up there and sneak. You weren't supposed to. They couldn't do anything to you if you're off the road. They just couldn't catch you on the road.
Yep.
Speaking of some sketchy stuff, and the hunting was pretty good up there for, till they really cracked down on it, but there's still no public access to that road. Like the resources are important and access to them is important, but it's just got to be balanced, I think.
Yeah. So tell folks how to find all your work. Cause if you're interested in, I always use the term wildlife politics. If you're interested in wildlife and management in Alaska, plus we've spent all of our time talking about like some controversial political stuff, but you're also very accomplished, avid hunter. You do everything from fur handling, like I said, hunting bears with longbows.
Yeah, we got to have him back to talk about some fun stuff.
Talk about all the fun stuff. But tell people how to follow, like where to listen, how to follow your adventures.
Yeah, so I'm staff writer for Outdoor Life, so outdoorlife.com.
And you publish on what cadence?
On usually a couple stories a week. I do like a lot of gun stuff, a lot of like gun reviews, stuff like that. But I'll dip into important, Alaska-based issues and the odd, hunting story. Like the narrative stories are my favorite.
I like your
most
gun
everything
stuff.
I read about the issues we've been talking about. Most everything I read is your work.
I like your gun
me
stuff.
Here, so that's not
your gun stuff's good because it's no nonsense.
No, and that's what, which it's funny because I'm staying with my coworker, our shooting editor, John Snow, here in town. He lives here in Bozeman, and like he's put a tremendous amount of work into me, and like this is how we're going to be. This is the type of gun content we're going to do, and just it's a lot of fun. I love my job. So outdoorlife.com, and I have my podcast. It's called Tundra Talk,
and that's your own podcast.
Yeah, that's mine.
Okay,
so. It's a fairly it's just me and other hunters from Alaska. I mean, we talk about Alaska, what we've been up to this last week, how to fix, I had to fix this generator. Here's how I did it. Just a whole variety of just kind of, loose, like casual stuff. But there's so many people up there. I'm not that special up there. Like I'm just a dude. There's a lot of cool people who do a lot of cool stuff up there. And that's kind of what I want to share in my podcast. So it's called Tundra Talk, and it
You
has
guys,
some foul language.
I need to get one, but you guys have that. You still do that merch where you do those Mickey Mouse boots?
I have some stickers at. I
Stickers?
don't have them with me, but I have some here.
Like the hoodies with the Mickey Mouse boots. What do you guys call the Mickey
bunny
Mouse
boots?
Bunny boots.
Yeah. No, I can. I've been getting bugged to do another order of those, so I'll make sure.
That's a
I'll make
sweet
sure you
shirt,
get one.
Right now, you got your Tundra
The old
Talk
Ski-Doo.
Tundra Talk snowmobile.
This is how I get all my clothes. Is I just do bulk orders of clothes and sell some of them, and then I don't have to buy clothes. But that's the old Ski-Doo Tundra 1-cylinder.
And Tundra Talk is anywhere you find podcasts.
Anywhere you find podcasts,
and you're on social media.
Instagram primarily, just at the Tyler Friel, because I couldn't think of something. More.
Do you like or hate when people write you emails and be like, "Hey, I want to come up. Where should I go?"
No, I get a lot. I get a lot of it, and that's kind of part of. I mean, that's my station is the type of stuff I do, and that's part of it. And I can't always get to everybody, but I try to give what help. I'm not going to tell you where I hunt. Where I'm hunting sheep.
You don't give coordinates.
No. But
guidance, but not coordinates.
Logistical. I get a lot of logistical questions, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm happy to entertain that stuff as best I can. And I do piss some people off occasionally. You mentioned longbows. You would think that shooting a grizzly bear with a stone arrowhead
would be universally celebrated.
Among me. So you would think that would be more controversial than shooting one with a 6.5 Creedmoor, but you would be wrong.
Seriously?
Oh yeah.
People get more pissed about the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Way more. When it's on a video that I could tell you, hey, I shot this with a 338, and you would believe me.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole nother.
No, that's funny though, man. People get annoyed.
Yeah.
Well, we got to have you back on to talk about like the good, not the good stuff. We have
the fun stuff. Yeah, the not depressing stuff.
Talk about the hunting and fishing stuff.
So I'm sorry if I was waiting. Like
it's not depressing. I think like I watch with fascination because I think that there's so it's just a really great lesson about land access, land administration, the push and pull of different interests. You can learn, I mean, when it comes to fighting about wildlife, you'll learn the most watching Alaska.
Yeah, I think so. It's still pretty raw.
You guys got like a dozen big game animals. I mean, it's just like there's a lot going on up there. And if you're interested in how these battles get fought and won and lost, look to Alaska, man. It's and following your work's a great way to follow it. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
But Alaska sucks. Don't tell your friends.
Sure. You should have made it seem a lot worse than you did. Be like, and then they closed the whole state to non-residents.
And all the sheep hunters died.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, Tyler Friel, check him out. He's at outdoorlife.com. Tundra Talk. Instagram. Like at Tyler Friel?
At the Tyler Friel.
The one.
Yeah.
Don't go to some fake Tyler Friel bastard. All right. Thank you.
I love those B.I.G. big white tails. Those stinky rut B.I.G. big white tails. I love those B.I.G. big W-H-I-T-E tails. I love those B.I.G. big white tails.
Big white tails, big white tails, big white tails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. Big white tails, big white tails, big white tails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. Dashing through the woods, for the morning light turns gray. Across the fields and draws, creeping all the way. I climb into the tree. Big bucks are on the way. What fun it is to sit and wait for a gosh darn deer all day. Oh, big... I'm sorry, what is this? Pizzicato strings? Who do you think I am, Enya? Get this out of here. I don't want to hear it. Thank you. Big white tails, big white tails, big white tails are great. Oh, what fun it is to sit in a freezing cold tree all day. My hopes and dreams are high. The rut is finally here. Mark said it's the most wonderful time to kill a white-tailed deer. Pinch points and petting's where you'll find me hanging 20 feet in a tree. Grunt tubes my bow and Spectre camo, this really can't be beat. A day or two ago, I thought that this was fun, but now I'm frozen to my seat and the good times they are gone. I've ate up all my snacks, my hands and toes are numb, and when I climbed down from my stand, that son of a buck decided to come.
I love those B.I.G. big white tails. Those stinky rotten B.I.G. big white tails.
I love those B.I.G. big W-H-I-T-E tails. I love those big white tails all day.